Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first installment of the BizPanther Game Changer series. During today's program, we'll be focused on the evolving workspace. And, you know, I think there's someone there that's not muted, maybe in the panelist group, or some background noise. All right. So today, during this program, we'll be focusing on the evolving workspace. And there is no surprise that during the current pandemic, the lives have really changed for all of us in different ways. And we have seen great impacts across the global economy, affecting all industries and changing us in ways that I believe we are still to understand. And so today's series, the Game Changer series, is really stemming from this environment and the experience that we're going through in terms of the pandemic. And really came from a challenge by our Dean Lee from the FIU College of Business, who challenged the FIU Business Alumni Board to create connections and build networks within not only our alumni, but throughout our community. And so while the current pandemic has made this task harder for each of us, we acknowledge that as FIU Panthers, we need each other more than ever. The BizPanther Game Changer series aims to cover important topics with game-changing alumni speakers, recognizing FIU alumni and their networks to share expertise as a community. Today, we have a great panel, and we will focus on the evolving workspace. My name is Eddy Augsten. I am Managing Director of Concurrent Advisors, an elite group of wealth advisors with over $15 billion in assets under management and advisory. And we also have 45 offices around the country. During this crisis, this conversation has been especially interesting for us. You know, I'll give you an example. The last 3 months during the crisis, we've opened 4 offices around the country. We have another 4 branches that are ready to open. We're planning to open. But we're still waiting a lot of feedback from the local governments. We're still trying to figure out what the build-outs might look like, and everything has sort of been stopped. And so this panel specifically today affects business owners and organizations like ours, but it's also about how disruptive this time has been to commercial real estate and to the office space specifically. So today's panel is uniquely positioned to help bring clarity to many of you, whether you're a tenant like us or someone in commercial real estate. Leading the conversation today, I would like to welcome Maureen Mascaro, our moderator. Maureen is the founder and chief project officer of the Common Area. She is a leading project management service company specifically focused on occupiers of office space. Because of her unique role in overseeing the entire project, she is able to lead a team of experts, like our fellow panelists, and is uniquely positioned to moderate our discussion today. Welcome, Maureen, and thank you for leading us today.
Great, thank you, Eddy. Thank you for the kind introduction, and I really appreciate you leading this board, connecting folks the way that you do, and for serving FIU so well. So my firm primarily focuses on helping occupiers of office space really just occupy office space, and that process begins with concept proofing with a client like Eddy, and working with brokerage teams to negotiate the lease. And then from there, similar to a producer of a movie, my firm helps bring in all the right team members, from the architect like Marlene, and vendors like Jose, who help with workplace strategy and furniture and other elements in a space, and then into construction, which includes JC's role and George's role with Wellington Construction. And we really bring it all in and help facilitate the production of your project from start to finish. We talk about your schedule, and we talk about your budget, and we help you go through the entire process. And obviously, with such a tumultuous time like with COVID, we're all learning and adapting and changing on a daily basis as information comes out. So we really wanted to provide this as a resource to you guys in our community, and we are all available to you as fellow Panthers. Reach out at any time if anything that we're talking about piques your interest. Kind of wanted to get started with an introduction around the room. So I think we'll do it in the order that I would normally engage each of these relationships with my clients. So starting with Marlene, do you want to give us a brief introduction about who you are and what your company does and your specialty?
Sure. Thanks, Maureen. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel and discussion. So I am the managing director of the Miami office for interior architects. And so what is unique about what we do and what FIU brings is that FIU is one of the schools, one of the few schools that has an interior architecture program. And that's exactly what we do. So interior architects, our name, says what we do. We're the largest global architectural firm that only focuses on interior spaces. And so we're uniquely aligned with FIU, but we work with corporate 500 companies in different vertical markets. So from retail to hospitality to corporate headquarters to financial, healthcare and education. So we go across the board and we provide the services to our clients that both you and Jose and JC's team, also provide in sync with what we do as a design company.
Absolutely. And we've worked together on projects in the past, and you guys do a really beautiful job creating spaces that are not only functional, but really help elevate the culture and feeling that you get when you walk into a space. So it's much more than just creating and designing a space. It incorporates culture and all of those things.
Absolutely.
And so Jose, you and I worked together for years and years, and you're not just a furniture company, you're so much more, especially when we get into technology and talking about dirt and how those solutions help. So let's get a quick introduction about who you are and what you do.
Good afternoon, and thanks for including me in this great opportunity to share a little bit with my fellow Golden Panthers. Compass is a 15-year-old organization that was specifically designed to guide clients through the difficult process of expanding, contracting, and changing the business environment. And we specifically gear our process around understanding clients' business strategies and then using that understanding to leverage the commercial real estate space so that clients get the maximum return on investment from the investment they make in workplace. So over the past 15 years, we've gone from startup to being one of the leading commercial office furnishings companies and also the leading prefabricated interior construction company here in South Florida. So thank you, FIU, for giving me this start and for this opportunity to share a little bit with my fellow Golden Panthers.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jose. So you touched on prefabricated walls and systems, and we're going to go down to JC and George and have them talk about how that they build those walls from scratch, from the ground up, and their specialty in the South Florida market and how they serve our community.
Hey, thank you. And thank you to FIU School of Business for having this webinar and game changer, which I really think it is a game changer, especially during this changing time. Our company for many, many years has been quite adaptive and responsive to the market, as it has to be, because the shifts in the economy and the shifts in the market, we feel directly as a construction company, specifically focused on office and interiors. And we do obviously not just do that type of work. We also do industrial work, commercial, and retail. We don't focus on residential necessarily, but we're primarily focused on the interior office spaces and common areas of Class A and Class B buildings. And therefore, the shifts in the economy with regards to what's happening in business affect us directly in that either spaces are contracting or expanding. So we see the dynamic in construction, specifically in our type of construction, as soon as the shifts start happening in the actual economy. With me today is the qualifier for Wellington Construction Group, happens to be my brother, George, and he's got about 30 some odd years of experience in this industry. And I thought it'd be valuable to have him here with us to talk this piece, since he really sees it from the executive side. I run the operations of the company and see everything that's happening in real time in space. But George really has a better aperture when it comes to what's coming next. So I thought it would be valuable to have him included in this webinar, as he's such a valuable asset to our organization. George?
Yeah, so thank you again for the opportunity to bring our knowledge onto the table and see it from a different perspective. From our side, we actually get to see a lot of what Marlene does. We get to work a lot with Jose. So we basically orchestrate everything based on whatever the designer puts together, and we make it all happen. So it was a good introduction what you mentioned, Maureen, and I think that to a certain degree, you know, we have worked together with each other at one point or another. One of the things that is at this point is very challenging is basically the different changes that are going on within our county and basically our country, really, with regards to construction, whether it's something that we have to mitigate with the building department or things that we have to do with the actual buildings. So those things I'm hopeful that we can go ahead and talk about briefly on this conversation. So thank you again for the opportunity.
You got it. And permitting has been a really interesting topic of conversation, how we're dealing with the jurisdictions and how we're navigating inspections on a job site in this COVID dynamic, especially with the South Florida market, sort of seeing a surge of sorts in cases. So we can certainly get into some of that. I want the group that's listening in today, all the attendees, to hear some of those challenges and understand how we help them navigate through those and minimize those risks to their budget and their schedule. So thank you for that. So Eddy, what I'd like to do is kind of get, kind of pick your brain about what your specific challenge is. In your Miami, you and I have a separate conversation about your South Florida office, your Miami Coral Gables potentially location. Your lease is coming up soon. You're considering a new lease, maybe at a new location, maybe expanding, maybe contracting. How many employees do you have? Talk us through what your specific situation is as a business leader and what keeps you up at night.
So you know, our business is unique in the sense that we have offices around the country, but all of which are small. So our offices range from 2,500 square feet to call it 6,000 square feet, depending on the market. And it's no different in Miami. And in each of those cases, depending on the market, and depending on time, those offices look different in the sense of how we work with our clients and how they use the office. And so what had been happening over the last few years is a lot of new office spaces had migrated, I think, as a trend would be, had migrated to more sort of shared open office, the open office feeling, shared office space with more conference rooms. And that's kind of where we had been going, and that's kind of where we were. And that did present its own challenges, but it also worked very well for our business model. And so having COVID occur right when we're looking at expanding and moving our South Florida office became a real challenge, because we had been used to this open floor plan model, which had clear challenges for our business model, but we were sort of dealing with them and overall still worked for what we were trying to achieve. And then COVID happens, and now as a few months go by, it starts to become more and more obvious that clients are not looking forward to coming back in the branch, not looking forward to sitting across from you for a desk. And like everyone on this call, have become more comfortable doing a Zoom call or conference call and sort of meeting in different circumstances. So it really had slowed us down quite a bit, trying to figure out what is the appropriate amount of office space, what is that office space going to look like, given the fact that we don't have these requirements where we have to be with our clients face to face.
Right, absolutely. And as much as I think people have adapted very quickly using technology to be efficient and effective in their day jobs, we also know that being together matters, and collaboration is not dead. In-person meetings and having that relationship building opportunity and really being able to troubleshoot issues or just go down the hall and talk to accounting about or legal about something is never going to go away. And I think a lot of people are thinking through, well, is the office space dead? And it's not, and it never will be. And we all know this because we've all been through different changes in the market for different reasons. And what it's about is helping you as the user understand what your office space of the future looks like. And some of us as panelists have talked individually about how, are we planning for the short term? Are we planning for the midterm? Are we planning for the long term? And we know that makes it difficult for you as a business owner to decide what length of lease that you're going to sign, right? Is it a 3 years, is it a 5 years, is it a 7 years? So I kind of want to pivot to Marlene and talk to her about how she helps a client think through short-term, mid-term, long-term based on each of those lease cycles and what she's seeing with some of her other active clients.
So Maureen, what we are seeing is, before COVID, we had clients that were, excited about moving into a new space or moving into a new building. And they had multiple square feet that they were looking at to move into. And now, after a few months of going back and really rethinking, a lot of them have had their staff members work really efficiently from home. And they have realized that those departments that may be non-client facing, that really do not have to be in a high-rise building or somewhere where they need to really see the client, they can continue to work from home. And so what that has triggered is that a lot of them are looking to reduce their real estate portfolio and have less square footage as part of their portfolio. What does that do? What that does is that, as you mentioned before, the culture is still important for organizations. That is what makes an organization, that is what attracts and retains the highest talents that you can have in your organization. And how do you do that if you have half of your workforce at home and half of your workforce in the office? So what we're doing is, our clients are still looking at 5 and 10-year leases. They still want to invest in that. They still want the stability of that. Landlords are being a bit more aggressive in providing them with better rates so that they do sign these long-term leases. But no one knows what is going to happen 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, when you're really into your lease. So how we're designing it is, we're designing it for today and tomorrow to the best of our ability. So if our clients only have 75% of their workforce or 50% of their workforce coming back, we'll design it to the minimum and we'll design it to what we feel might be their maximum. So if before COVID, this particular client was going to have 100% of their workforce come in, and now they're telling us 50, we're planning for 50 today, but 75 tomorrow. And so the spaces are being very flexible. We're planning them in a way where they can be reconfigured without high construction cost, but giving them a space that they can flex and they can grow into as this issue starts to realize itself and get better. Now, tomorrow will be something else. We don't know what that might be. So that flexibility still has to be planned into that.
Yep. And Jose, I know your firm has been doing a ton of this, which is, how do you help firms return to work, even though we all know that we've been working all along here? How are you helping your clients adapt immediately to get back into the office, plexiglass, signage, all the different things that your firm is doing?
Well, we've gotten a tremendous amount of requests from clients existing and clients that are looking for help implementing the mitigation that the CDC and many organizations are asking for a safe return to work. And that includes screens and dividers and space division. But our approach has always been, and I recommend to everybody that's listening, that we start off with a clear understanding of the goals that we're trying to accomplish, so that clients aren't inappropriately guided towards the solution to the problem because a factory is trying to implement a particular strategy or trying to sell product. But instead, let's think about what's the protocol that we're going to implement. Make sure that we have a clear protocol of how we're going to bring people back. Once we understand that, then we can make intelligent and well thought out investments in the solutions that will create the proper environment for a safe return, but also for it to be consistent with the protocol that they've already thought through carefully, instead of just a knee-jerk reaction to something that somebody thought was a cool idea. The other part of this that I highly recommend to everybody that's on this call is, whatever investments you make, don't make them permanent. Make investments in things that create the proper environment and the safe environment, but that are also reversible. So anything that you implement that's not reversible could inhibit the success of the business strategy you're trying to implement once we do find a solution to this problem, because I believe there will be. So therefore, whether it's 6 months, a year, or 2 years from now, whatever you implement, make it reversible, but make it consistent with the protocol that you've thought out carefully of how you bring people back to work.
Right, and let's talk about permanent changes versus temporary changes. We're all knee-jerk reacting to this. We're trying to create a safe environment. Obviously, this is a very scary situation health-wise for many people for many reasons. And I kind of hearken this back to after every major hurricane. You know, there can be some code changes that we as builders, are those involved in building anyway, need to implement into our designs and in our build outs because they're code required changes. So we saw this after some hurricanes and new technologies and building materials come out. Those are implemented in the codes within Florida and the United States beyond. Similar with energy savings, right? Light switches need to be on occupancy sensors, and that makes a lot of sense for many reasons. So I think all of us kind of have this feeling that we're all making these suggestions for ways to adapt your space. And eventually the codes will catch up with some of these things that really do make sense to become a permanent part of our built environment. And I'd like Wellington to maybe touch on some of that stuff. We're thinking about things like touchless faucets. And I know you've been doing a lot of work to help landlords get their common area spaces ready for immediate return to work, and then longer term air conditioning infrastructure systems. So let's jump into some of the constructability issues that you guys are seeing and how you're implementing changes in the environment.
All right, so there's two perspectives that we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the short-term perspective, and George will talk about the long-term perspective as well. What we've seen in the immediate, because we're responsive to buildings for responsive maintenance as well, and that includes small jobs or buildings management or landlord teams need, including tenants as well. And we've seen a lot of little implementations like the one that Jose was talking about. Immediate, what do they call that? I'm losing my mind. Plexiglass screens. We've also gone in and taken, not just taken some doors out, but they've added some, these like foot things that you can use your foot to open the door. We've added some of those. We've been removing common area or disabling common area water fountains in buildings. And lastly, we've been contracted to help relocate just heavy furniture in spaces so that people can basically be spaced out, although I know we're in Jose's space when it comes to that. But some of those other details that we've been able to do to immediately create systems in buildings based on requests from landlords and from managers. In addition to that, what we've seen out there is a lot of procedural changes, right? Whereas before, as many people get in the elevator would get in the elevator, now you're probably seeing, if you've been out to any buildings, that there's usually maybe 2 or 4 spaces where you can stand on the elevator. And as a matter of fact, one of our protocols internally working in buildings was to decrease the use of elevators altogether in the early stages of the crisis back in March. And we were just using stairs wherever possible. And we were not getting in elevators with other people before all of these protocols started. And lastly, and very, very prominent, is signage. And you've seen it everywhere you go now. Signage just to remind you about washing your hands and using the mask and social distancing. Those things we've seen as an immediate response to the crisis in terms of buildings from our perspective and implementation. George?
Jose, I just wanted to touch bases on something that you said with regards to your furniture being very, you have to implement time use and how you do it so that you can expand and or contract whenever needed. I think that's an excellent point. Some of the things, going back to construction, some of the things that I think that we have to take a little bit more time in realizing is that for the most part, and historically, I think we have left everything towards the end so that construction sort of, we crunch everybody in and then, you know, good luck contractor, get it done in 8 weeks, you know. So I think that one of the things that has to be taken in consideration is probably taking a little bit more time in allowing time for permitting, simply because things are not, I think that they're probably polish up a lot of the things that they had thought about in previous occasions, which is actually doing everything online. However, while we mold ourselves into that particular model, we have to start thinking about giving some time for permitting. In addition to permitting, once you have your permit, obviously you actually have to build, and within the building industry, we have a lot of changes. You know, as JC was mentioning, you know, we have to deal with elevators. In many buildings, we have, you know, we don't have the luxury of a freight elevator. So we basically have to work with people in order to bring things up and down. And then obviously we have to, you know, do cleanup and whatnot, which we typically do. But nowadays we have to do a little bit more down. We have to sanitize. So then that takes a little bit longer. I have some notes in here, which I'm looking at. Suppliers to see whether or not, many times we were able to go and pick up something. Now we actually have to schedule things, and we have to make sure that, you know, they're available, make sure that they have the availability of a particular product so that we can go ahead and pick it up. And last but not least is trying to schedule things that are long lead items. You know, typically your doors, your carpets, glass, what have you. Those things are long lead items, and now there's, you know, those things are basically longer lead items. You know, we have had cases where, you know, we have a delivery of a carpet per se, and it's to be delivered a particular day, and then that same day we get, oh, listen, we were not able to deliver for X or Y reason, and then obviously that causes further delays. So those are the kind of things that we have to start thinking about and allowing a little bit more time, simply because things have changed. We no longer can operate the way that we used to, you know, so we really have to plan. We have to make sure that everybody does a good job in knowing exactly what they need, so that we can go ahead and put it into perspective, and then, you know, allocate some time to get it done. Personally, I've always had an issue with allowing so little time at the end of the entire process for construction. I think that needs to change a little bit. You know, you need to allow a little bit more time so that things really, you know, they get to cook and get done better. Right now, you know, we obviously, while we learn about this process and we adapt ourselves, it's going to take some time, and we're going to have some growing pains, but it's definitely doable. I mean, we haven't stopped working. As a matter of fact, I see a lot of enhancements in buildings, particularly in Class B buildings, where people are basically introducing, you know, nice looking lobbies, upgrades in restrooms, so on and so forth. And that's basically is to attract people. And whether or not that will work in the long run, I think it's definitely something that we can look at in terms of what is the market bringing on to us. You know, is it going to be something that is going to be like Marlene was saying, where, you know, we're going to adapt little by little, or maybe landlords have the wrong idea, or they have a different perspective perhaps. But obviously the landlord's always very optimistic that they're going to get a lot of tenants.
Yeah.
I wanted to add something to supply chain with that, Maureen, if I may. It's just a small little tidbit on that. In that, George mentioned earlier that we were able to really just move quickly through jobs because supply chain was just so robust before. And now we are actually watching economies of source countries to see how our supply chain is affected for things like drywall, studs, cable for wiring, etc. And when COVID first started, it was one of our first analytic questions, you know, hey, listen, what is the market going to do? Not right now, because they knew there was plenty of supply on hand, but in 6 months. And we're really watching that closely. And imagine we're just a contractor that's doing construction of office space here in Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach County. And we're looking at economics throughout the entire global market to see how it's going to affect our lead times on things that should not be lead times, like drywall, studs, etc. Just
Great.
a thought.
Yeah, and for sure, one of the ways that we can help as project managers is in helping our clients think through the strategy of when to engage a general contractor in the process. So what we had been doing even before COVID is really started to move to a place where we're bringing you in during pre-construction, where you're teaming with Marlene during the design process. You're helping to identify the long lead items early on, and you're helping to guide the process of design in a way that sets you up for a faster construction in the tail end, and getting you under an LOI of some sort so that you can at least start purchasing those long lead items or starting those submittal processes kind of ahead of the permitting game, and really getting things prepared for that. If we need to, we may competitively bid certain trades out after that. But that's the way that we as a group can strategize to help mitigate some of those schedule issues that you talked about For sure, permitting and inspections are taking longer than they had before. And I think we're going to continue to see that so long as people are falling ill and not coming to work, and that different jurisdictions are restricting travel throughout the city. So wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I want to pivot for a minute over to talking about technology, because Jose touched on this idea of prefabricated walls. And then Marlene, I wanted to also give you a chance to talk about how people are starting to integrate audiovisual components into some of their existing spaces. So we're not just talking about the new environment where you're moving to a new office. How are we adapting your current environment? So maybe we'll start with Marlene and talk about the AV components first, and then we'll flip over to you, Jose, and talk about prefab walls and things.
Well, technology is going to play an integral role moving forward in today's, I guess, today's world. You know, we've all understood and we've seen how quickly organizations have been able to pivot, sometimes even in 24 hours, like our firm, 750 people in 24 hours, we were working off the cloud and servicing our clients. And, you know, technology has to be robust and it has to support this new virtual world. And so what we're seeing is a lot more of the virtual calls, a lot more of these meetings, teams that are in the office, teams that are not in the office, that they can collaborate. Our firm, for one, is we're developing a program that will be a series of avatars. So the client will have an avatar, we'll have an avatar, the contractor will have one, and we can actually go into a room as avatars and start either visioning session, you know, having a vision session. We can actually write on a whiteboard. We can look at materials, all with a virtual person of ourselves that are all in one room in order to still be able to collaborate together. So technology is integral from, you know, everything that has to do with hands-free, from lighting to doors to access to everything, to the actual communication between people.
Absolutely, yes. And it's important to get that audiovisual component in during the certain phases of design. And we were going to touch on the phases of design. I think we might be running a little low on time to do that. But what I wanted to point out is that technology is so important to pin down during the early parts of the design process, and integrate that into your overall budget so that you're not hit with an unexpected cost for audiovisual, because these elements, you know, can be very pricey. And aside from furniture and construction, one of the most expensive elements of your build out, but so important to how your space functions for your team to be able to collaborate together. So definitely early engagement and asking your clients those questions about how do you want to function, and Eddy asking, you know, how do you interact with your clients now, and can we introduce some new ways that you hadn't thought of or known about that you can interact with your clients from this point forward using technology. So, and Jose, I know you've got, you represent a specific line of really fascinating wall structures that integrate some of that audiovisual within it and actually can be reconfigured throughout a space to flex as the needs of the business change over time, which we know we'll see as we evolve through COVID.
Yeah, I mean, we look at technology two ways. One is artifacts and technology advancements in artifacts that allow technology to be incorporated and implemented retroactively or integrated, like you were saying, as part of the initial design plan or part of the initial construction process. So what we look at is that we've teamed up with organizations that have come up with technological advancements in the way the interior construction is built, so that you can adapt and make mistakes. You can make mistakes, you can adapt, you can incorporate technology in places that in traditional construction methods you wouldn't be able to because of the fixed nature of the traditional construction process. So incorporating technology, whether it's to incorporate electrical systems, physical dividers, or technology into the space, is one part. The other part is software development. So we've invested in software that when we work with organizations with advanced systems like IA, we can incorporate IA's vision for a client into a virtual reality setting so that clients can actually walk into the space and visualize and feel and touch, almost feel and touch the space before they implement the process and build the space. What that allows us to do is allow clients to identify errors or identify differences in strategy before they go into the fixed nature of space. And today that's going to be much more important because clients like Eddy aren't sure whether they need 2,500 or 3,500 square feet. And getting a sense of how that feels when you're not an architect, when you're not an interior designer, but you're a financial planner, is very difficult on paper. But if we put them in a virtual reality setting, they can stand, they can sit, they can turn around and get a sense of the spatial reality that they're facing. And that speeds up the process because they can feel it and give the input to the architects and designers to implement that more quickly. So technology is two parts: software to speed up and improve the validation of space, and architecture and artifact technology improvements that allows clients to adapt to the changes in their business.
Right. Yeah, these fly-throughs that you're talking about with virtual reality, I mean, they really help our clients visualize, as you were saying, what the space is going to feel like. And if we're really trying to design a space without being able to physically go into the architect's office and review drawings together, you can literally send your clients a link and walk them through the fly-through on their screen, or even you can send them virtual goggles of sorts, and they can put their phone into it and really look around the space and see what their built environment is going to be. And so
that's real. All that's real today.
All that's real today, and we're actively using and have been, in fact, actively using this for a long time, except for it's been hard to have that adoption. And I think what COVID's done for a lot of us is forcing us into the future a lot faster. We would have gotten there in 5 years, but now we're getting there today, and we got there yesterday, which is fascinating to me.
That's right.
So it's really going to be interesting to see what comes out of this. I do know for sure that the real estate market in South Florida and worldwide really is having a tremendous shakeup. But for sure, having a group of consultants like us who are constantly learning and growing and challenging ourselves in how we serve our clients, you know that you're going to get the right advice when you go to build out your next project. And it's so important to have the right consultants on board, to have the right team mindset, to have people on board like Jose and Marlene and JC and George, who understand that in order to get through a project, you need to have trust, you need to have open collaboration and communication through all parties, and you need to work together as a team, not in an adversarial environment where you're afraid that your GC is just going to hit you with 100 change orders. That's not the environment that we're looking for. And so when you work with a project management group, or you work with an architect like Marlene, you're getting that partnership where she knows that her relationship with her GC and her client are both equally important, because we're all working together for the common goal, which is to serve you guys as the client. So I think we're kind of rounding out to the end of this, but I don't want to end it and go into QA without first asking you guys, how has your experience as a Panther at FIU graduate really shaped your career, shaped your life, personal, professional, or otherwise? And I'd like to start with you, Jose. I know that you for sure are a relationship builder, and everything about your experience as a Panther, you know, is all about that relationship. So.
Well, I owe my career to FIU. I started out as an intern student, which all of us should be looking to bring on FIU interns to give them the head start that I was given by Dr. Nichols when 30-some years ago, he gave me an internship and introduced me to the commercial office furnishings industry. Fast forward 30-some years, you know, we're 15 years into a startup. We've become one of the leading organizations in South Florida. And on top of that, I met my wife at FIU 30 years ago. So I owe FIU my family and my career. And for that, that's why I encourage all of you to get involved with FIU. Give back, because it gives back to you. Whatever we put in to this great institution has paid off in multiple ways for myself. So I encourage all of you to do the same.
Absolutely. And Marlene, you have an amazing story with your experience with FIU and even how you built your business around the platform of talent that's come out of our university.
Absolutely. So FIU prepared me to be able to take my career where I have taken it. And I've always been a big proponent of giving back. And so 2/3 of our IA Miami office are Panthers. And I'll add to that my son and my daughter as well. But you know, the way that FIU is preparing students today, and this is why I go back to my initial comment about the program, the interior architecture program, which is so in line with what we do. The students are amazing, and they're perfectly prepared to go into the workplace. So we're a huge supporter of FIU. We participate in the career fair and design crits, and we're on the advisory board and so on. And so it's been fantastic for me personally and for our business here.
It's wonderful. Okay, JC, you're on the alumni board with us, and you're such a ball of energy, and you have such an impact on our group here. So tell us your FIU story.
I'll tell you. Okay, originally I got kicked off of the FIU football team, and then I had nothing else to do, so I came and traded in for a hard hat. Yeah, no, the university's been great for me. I got my bachelor's degree back in 2004, kind of late in life. I got it through the U.S. Army and got my commission as a second lieutenant through FIU ROTC. Then later on, when my career was at past the midpoint, about 15 years of active duty at that point, and I knew I was going to transition back to the reserve component, I looked to FIU for an advanced degree and got my MBA at a school of business. And then I ended up here. I know he's my brother, but I ended up here because of FIU. FIU provided a bunch of opportunities for me for employment elsewhere. And then when George presented his opportunity to me, I went and met with some of the professors there at the university, and we did some analysis of this business and the opportunities that were afforded to me here and in these other these large corporations, Fortune 500s, every last one of them. And in the end, I felt that the skills that I had gained from the MBA program at FIU really would give me an advantage and help my brother grow this company. And it's proven to be the case. I'm here now. I'm starting my 7th year now. And it's been fantastic. And I really do owe everything that we're doing today in terms of our operations and business strategies to the MBA program at FIU. And I think that you could agree that some of the things that I brought to the table have really changed the way that we do business. So then going back to the giving back part that Jose was talking about, you know, I think that once you get to a certain level in life and you have gained enough experience and knowledge, it is absolutely a requirement of leaders to train the next generation of leaders. I know that I had opportunities to be mentored, and many of us here on this panel have been mentored, and I believe that that is the way that you come full circle when it comes to being a successful individual. You give back what you've learned over the many, many years of experience that you have. And those experiences don't all have to be great. You can have bad experiences and good experiences, and we can bring them back to really shape and mold the future generation. So I don't know of another institution in South Florida that produces more leaders than this great university. Not only is it a fantastic school of business, but from the Army perspective, it is the #1 producing ROTC program in the entire United States. It produces just as many officers as West Point does. So, I mean, that's right here in Miami, Florida. You see what I'm talking about? So we're a powerhouse. And we're a humble powerhouse because we're all over the world. We have a tremendous amount of impact. Just look, when you asked, hey, who can we get on this panel? It was people chomping at the bit to get on this panel because it's just, we're so full of professionals here. So it's my opinion that being involved at the university and bringing this kind of thing to the table for the greater community is what the university is all about. So those are my 2 cents. And I know they make an impact. We've all seen it.
Yes. So I'll give you my quick story at FIU. I worked full time through my entire education. It took me about 7 years to get through school for my bachelor's degree. And I didn't have a lot of time to join, any of those groups and sororities and clubs and all that. I didn't spend a lot of time on campus. but I was implementing everything I was learning in the classroom within my full-time job. And I was in mergers and acquisition and corporate strategy. And I really got to see how a business runs from the inside out for a company called Interval International. And I spent probably 8 years of my life there. I eventually left and went into the real estate market. And fast forward 9 years, and they're actually one of my clients, one of my biggest clients right now. And I'm doing a full headquarter restack of their programming in South Miami. And it's been an amazing opportunity to work with them, but I wouldn't have had such an impact and worked with so many people in that organization and been so effective there if it weren't for what I was learning and implementing from my classroom experience at FIU. And then I recently came back engaged because Janine, who is an amazing connector of people in the South Florida market, kind of met her, and she was heavily involved with the FIU alumni group and invited me in. And that's how I've met all of you and been able to have the opportunity to moderate this panel today with all of you. And now I'm feeling that community as being part of a Panther that I didn't get while I was in school. So I really do encourage any of you on the line that are former Panthers or former students from your other schools to re-engage with your campus and give back to all that they're doing for the next generations of students that are coming out. I think, Eddy, we haven't hit your story with FIU and your involvement. And once we learn about your involvement with FIU in your past, I think we do want to jump into Q&A. And so I want to encourage participants who are listening in, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, in the Q&A chat. Let us know what you've got, and we're going to jump into those questions next.
Yeah, thank you, Maureen. And so I'll tell you, I'll keep mine short because I'd love to get to some of these questions and open it up before we run out of time here. So I similar story to you. I worked before I got to FIU and throughout FIU, and work was always number one before school, and FIU was just a checkbox for me, right? And so unfortunately that as I was finishing FIU, I realized that probably wasn't the best plan. And I started to focus at the very end and really did a little too late at the end of my time at FIU, found out that I really loved economics, which most people don't, but I did for some reason, figured that out a little too late. But it allowed me to leave with a work ethic and a competitive spirit that allowed me to thrive, right? And so I left FIU, I left Miami, I went to Atlanta, Georgia, started working, and just realized that I could work just a little bit harder than most others where I was competing. And so I was able to move along very fast, and years later, I had an opportunity to move back to Miami, at which point I took that opportunity. And as I came back, I realized, how many other students I met that were just as competitive as I was. And I found that to be the unique part of FIU, building just really competitive students. And the other side of that was I came back to FIU and I joined the mentor program. And I encourage everyone on this call to come back to FIU and at the very minimum, participate in the mentor program. What I discovered right away was that the students, after I came back many years later, were just so much smarter, so much more competitive than I ever was. And I realized what FIU was doing was just very special in our community. And I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to support it. And I wanted to get back to it. And so that's what I did. I started the mentor program, ended up on the alumni board, big supporter of Dean Lee, who's done just a tremendous job for our college. And you can see it. We have multiple top-ranked programs, MBA programs, master programs, undergrad programs across the school. And so I encourage all of you to come back, look at that, help a mentor, and participate and grow our network, because that's what we're here to do. So that's my story. Maureen, I'll turn it over to you. It looks like we might have some questions here.
Sure, and it took me 3 tries to pass economics at FIU.
That's right.
Let's see what questions we have in the chat here. I know there's some that have been answered, and a lot of them had to do with, are any of the panelists mentors in the Inspiring Futures mentor program? And yes, absolutely. There was a question about from Jesus Rodriguez about Any fun or novel ideas to make the return to the office more pleasant and engaging for staff, at least in his case, he says. Most people seem to find all the new protocols a little depressing. I couldn't agree with you more, and not at all conducive to team building. It's true. You're walking in and you know, you're getting this temperature reading that feels a little obtrusive, and you're seeing signage that says, "Don't forget to wear your mask." And I think what we're seeing is, you know, architects are helping to craft the language on the signage. And Marlene, can you talk a little bit about your branding efforts and how you reframe some of this discussion to make it more positive?
Yeah, actually, we have an environmental graphics team that has put together a whole package of signage that we are helping with our clients, but we've also implemented them in our office. And so the signage is not as serious. It's a little bit more fun. It's a little bit more colorful, but it still reminds you of what you need to do. So we have arrows on the floor. We have, you know, a signage where you have, you know, wash your hands, or a sanitation station, or so on. So we've taken it and just made it a little bit more fun rather than so rigid. But it's an interesting reminder of what we need to do without really being so strict, because a lot of people are hesitant to come to the office. Some not so much because of fear, but because you have to wear your mask, you have to follow so many protocols that it feels almost robotic, and they don't want it to feel like that because it wasn't like that before.
Right.
So we're helping to try to ease that a bit.
Yeah, I've been involved in a lot of conversations with my clients and their HR groups, and trying to talk through how past clients and active clients, how are we going to navigate this? And the conversation has really been encouraging, not only because of trying to figure out how to go back to the office in a funner way, but how are we making working from home less isolating? And I think, you know, one of the biggest challenges is that people are bogged down with the responsibilities of caring for family members that would not normally be home, and they can't focus and concentrate. So I do see a lot of firms trying to implement some sort of Slack or some other technology that helps bring a sense of culture and community to the space. But really, that's the joy about working in an office environment. You get to talk at the water cooler, right, and catch up with how people's weekends went. And there is an element of that that's missing. And I think that the pendulum swing will come back to a new normal. And mm-hmm. we don't know what that looks like in the future. We don't have any additional questions, and we're almost at the 4 o'clock mark. I do want to encourage everyone on the call to make sure that you reach out to us. All of us are on LinkedIn. We're always available to you if you have any questions, even if it's a 15-minute phone call. My website has a bunch of resources for COVID, and as each of these firms come out with their own resources, I can add it to that. It's thecommonarea.co. We have a resource. You can sign up for newsletters. All of these companies here have the same types of things. Sign up for our newsletters. Engage with us. I really encourage you to stay connected. And
Maureen, if I could just address this
sure.
question that Jesus brought up, because I think in the short run, maintaining corporate culture, maintaining your strategic plan as it relates to hiring and keeping people happy as part of your firm is the biggest challenge that all of us are going to face, because isolation is just that. And what we've done and what we've seen other clients do is to try to subtly but creatively mimic the same activities. So for example, a morning coffee. So normally you walk in, you grab a cup of coffee. How was your weekend, right? And instead of creating formal Zoom calls where everything is very structured and scheduled, sometimes the right thing is maybe create a morning coffee where everybody can just sit down and say, how'd your day go? What are we doing today? What are you doing next? Where are you going? So that you mimic some of the normal activities that happen at a time when we can't have those normal activities, because
right.
we can't put everybody together.
Exactly.
And like that, we have to recreate the normal activities in a different way. Yep. So I'd say of all the ideas, that's the one that I've seen other people implement that is the closest to what I think can be comfortable.
Right. All right, so with that, let's pass it over to Eddy. I think he has some closing remarks for us, and I want to thank you all again for joining today. It's been a great discussion here with all these panelists, and thank you so much for your questions in the chat boxes. So take us home, Eddy.
No, thank you, Maureen, especially. Thanks for putting this together and really working hard behind the scenes. Thank you to the panel. You did a phenomenal job. For everyone joining us on the Zoom call today, again, thank you. Reach out to anyone if you have any questions. If you'd like to support FIU and become more involved, we are all here to answer your questions and get you more involved. This concludes the first BizPanther Game Changer series. Thank you.